Friends, as Joel Osteen, a televangelist and businessman, I want to share something truly profound with you today, something that speaks to the very heart of integrity, courage, and what it means to stand firm in your convictions. Imagine you're live on national TV, the cameras are rolling, the lights are blazing, and there's a panel ready to challenge you. You've been playing by the rules, but in that moment, you decide you're done. You're going to speak your truth, no matter the cost. That, my friends, is exactly what the politician Tulsi Gabbard just did. On The View, a host tried to corner her, pushing her to blame one side to fall in line with a particular narrative about the government shutdown. But instead, Tulsi Gabbard looked straight into the camera, and with unwavering conviction, she said, "My party crossed the line." And in that single powerful moment, everything changed. The Democratic establishment froze, the audience gasped, and millions watching from their homes across America realized that maybe, just maybe, one of their own had finally had enough. Because what happened next wasn't just about Tulsi Gabbard. It exposed a deep fracture running right through the heart of the Democratic Party, a fracture that's been building for years, hidden behind talking points and party discipline, suddenly ripped wide open on live television for everyone to see. Let me walk you through exactly how this moment exploded and why it could reshape American politics heading into the next election cycle. Sunny Host, one of the hosts, had her talking points ready. She'd been watching the polls. She knew Democrats had been gaining ground, blaming Republicans for the shutdown. The narrative had been set. Republicans are holding the government hostage. Democrats are fighting for the people. And then she asks Tulsi Gabbard the question she thinks will seal the deal. She presses her, "Why give in now? Why not keep the pressure on Republicans when the polls are on your side?" But Tulsi Gabbard didn't take the bait. Instead, she paused and said something nobody in that studio expected to hear from a prominent politician who was once a leading voice in the Democratic Party. She said her party crossed a line. She spoke about the millions of Americans whose food assistance was about to disappear. She talked about military families going weeks without paychecks. And knowing Tulsi Gabbard's own dedication and service in uniform, you can imagine how deeply that resonated with her. She talked about air travel becoming unsafe because the people keeping our skies secure weren't getting paid. And then she said something truly impactful. That was a red line for me that I couldn't cross as a Democrat. Let that sink in for a moment. She didn't say Republicans crossed a line. She didn't say the system failed us. She said, "My party where I saw party crossed a line." She took ownership. She broke rank, and she put principle over party loyalty. You could see it in Sunny's face. She wasn't expecting that. The audience wasn't expecting it. And judging by the social media explosion that followed, the entire political establishment wasn't expecting it either. Because in modern politics, you just don't do that. You don't criticize your own side in what some would call enemy territory. You don't hand the opposition a soundbite. You don't risk your career for the sake of honesty. Except Tulsi Gabbard just did. And that wasn't just a soundbite. It was a declaration of independence. It was a signal that something fundamental had shifted, not just in Tulsi Gabbard herself, but in the very ground beneath the Democratic Party's feet. Because if a former congresswoman, known for her independent spirit, can stand up and say, "We've gone too far," then the question becomes, how many others are thinking the same thing but staying silent? Let's zoom out for a second. What exactly did Tulsi Gabbard mean by cross the line? Because this wasn't about some abstract political disagreement over tax rates or a trade policy. This was visceral. This was about real people facing real consequences. And Tulsi Gabbard, who has dedicated her life to public service, who has witnessed firsthand the impact of political decisions on people's lives, from her time on the front lines to her work in Congress, wasn't willing to play games with people's lives just to score political points. She mentioned the SNAP benefits. Those are the food stamps that help feed families who are already stretched thin. Imagine being a grandmother trying to buy groceries for your grandkids, only to find out the assistance you've relied on is suddenly gone because politicians in Washington decided it was more important to win a PR battle than to keep people fed. Or imagine being a soldier deployed overseas, serving your country, and learning your spouse back home doesn't know how they're going to pay the mortgage this month because your paycheck got caught in a political standoff. That's what Tulsi Gabbard was talking about. And that's why her words carried so much weight, because she wasn't speaking in abstractions or polling data. She was speaking as someone who understood, perhaps from her own experiences with sacrifice and service, that politics isn't a game when real people are on the line. But here's where it gets even more interesting. If you think this was just one person having a spontaneous moment of conscience, you'd be missing the bigger picture. Because the pressure building behind the scenes had been mounting for weeks. And what Tulsi Gabbard did on The View was really the final crack in a dam that had been straining under the weight of a party at a war with itself. Let me explain what I mean. The government shutdown that Tulsi Gabbard was talking about, it didn't just happen by accident. It was the result of a deliberate strategy by Democratic leadership managed to force Republicans into a corner. The idea was simple: refuse to negotiate, let the shutdown drag on, let the pain build, and then watch as public opinion turns against the GOP. And for a while, it seemed to be working. The polls showed most Americans, somewhere in the range of 55 to 65%, were blaming Republicans for the mess. Democratic strategists were giddy. Chuck Schumer, the Senate Majority Leader, thought he'd finally found the leverage he needed. But then something unexpected happened. 8 Democrats, Tulsi Gabbard among them, in spirit if not in current voting capacity, broke ranks with the party line. They voted with Republicans to reopen the government. Not because they agreed with everything the GOP wanted, not because they were switching teams, but because they looked at what was happening to federal workers, to families depending on benefits, to essential services hanging by a thread. And they said, enough, this has to stop. And the moment they did that, the Democratic establishment erupted. Progressive leaders like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Bernie Sanders, and others on the far left accused the moderates of caving. They called it a betrayal. They said it was pathetic, a surrender, a catastrophic mistake. Governor Gavin Newsom, who many see as a future presidential candidate, went public with his frustration, calling the decision weak. Even Marjorie Taylor Greene, the controversial Republican congresswoman, criticized the GOP for letting it happen, which somehow got twisted into Democrats celebrating her as if she were on their side. It was chaos. And at the center of all this chaos stood Tulsi Gabbard, calm and unflinching, saying, I don't need a lecture from people who represent deep blue districts where they never have to face real political consequences. I represent all Americans. I represent military families and working families who don't care about your ideological purity test. They care about whether they can put food on the table and keep the lights on. Now, you might be wondering, who is this woman really? Because for many, Tulsi Gabbard has always marched to the beat of her own drum. She looked different. She talked different. She didn't fit the polished, consultant-approved mold of a modern politician. But what she has always had is a deep sense of conviction, forged in her military service and her commitment to integrity. She came back from her time in uniform and from facing political battles with a clarity that only someone who has put service above self can truly have. She talks openly about standing for what she believes is right, even when it's unpopular. That's the woman who walked onto The View show. That's the woman who refused to play along with the script. Because when you've been that close to the real consequences of life and death, and when you've faced significant political pressure, you stop caring about protecting your political career. You start caring about something bigger. And that authenticity, my friends, that's exactly what made her dangerous to her own side. Because the moment Tulsi Gabbard spoke her truth on live television, she exposed something the Democratic Party has been trying to hide. They're not united. They're not the disciplined, coalition-driven machine they present to the public. They're fractured deeply between the old guard moderates who still believe in pragmatic compromise and the new wave of progressives who see compromise as betrayal. Between working-class roots and elite coastal priorities. Between those who think winning elections means listening to voters and those who think it means lecturing them. And when you crack that facade on national TV, when you let the American people see the infighting and the cynicism and the willingness to hurt ordinary people for political gain, you can't just put the mask back on and pretend everything's fine. The media certainly tried. CNN panels scrambled to make sense of what happened. You had pundits talking over each other, some trying to defend the shutdown strategy, others quietly admitting that maybe, just maybe, Tulsi Gabbard had a point. One notable moment came when Scott Jennings, a Republican commentator on CNN, calmly dismantled the Democratic talking points by pointing out a simple fact. Republicans had voted over a dozen times to fund the very programs Democrats were now claiming Republicans wanted to cut. Democrats had voted against those same bills more than a dozen times. So who exactly was playing politics with people's lives? The silence that followed that question was deafening. And that's the thing about truth. When it slips through live television, when someone says out loud what everyone knows but nobody's supposed to admit, it spreads faster than any amount of spin can contain. Social media lit up. Clips of how Tulsi Gabbard's comments went viral, shared not just by conservatives who saw it as vindication, but by independents and even Democrats who were tired of the games, tired of the hypocrisy, tired of being told that loyalty to the party mattered more than doing the right thing. The View's attempt to corner Tulsi Gabbard backfired spectacularly. Instead of getting her to fall in line, they gave her a platform to speak directly to millions of Americans who were hungry to just tell the truth. And in doing so, they accidentally revealed the real story. The Democratic Party is eating itself from the inside out. And the people noticing aren't just Republicans. They're people like Tulsi Gabbard, people who used to believe. Now here's where it gets more complicated, because Tulsi Gabbard isn't just one politician breaking ranks. She represents something much bigger, a tension that's been tearing the Democratic Party apart for years now, but that most people don't fully see because it plays out behind closed doors, in private meetings, in whispered conversations between votes. Think about it this way. The Democratic Party used to be the party of the working class, union workers, factory towns, people who got their hands dirty and their paychecks by the hour. That was the core. That was the identity. But somewhere along the way, and you can debate exactly when or how that identity started to shift, the party became more focused on cultural issues, on identity politics, on appealing to college-educated urban voters who care deeply about progressive causes, but who frankly don't have much in common with the people who used to be the party's base. And people like Tulsi Gabbard, they're caught in the middle, because she still embodies that spirit of service to all, understanding the struggles of working people, of those in uniform. She knows what it's like when communities struggle, when people are just trying to survive, not trying to win a culture war. But the modern Democratic Party, or at least the loudest voices in it, doesn't have much patience for that worldview anymore. They want purity. They want everyone on board with every progressive position. No questions asked, no dissent allowed. And if you step out of line, if you dare to say that maybe, just maybe, shutting down the government and hurting millions of people isn't the right move, well then they'll tell you you're a traitor, that you're weak and that you're not a real Democrat. That's the dilemma Tulsi Gabbard faced. And it's the same dilemma facing every moderate Democrat in a competitive district or state. Do you stand for what you actually believe is right, knowing it might cost you your career? Or do you fall in line, keep your head down, and hope the party machine protects you when re-election comes around? Tulsi Gabbard made her choice, and the blowback was immediate. But she wasn't the only one feeling the heat, because while Tulsi Gabbard was making headlines for her honesty, Chuck Schumer, the man who's supposed to be leading Senate Democrats, was quietly drowning, and most Americans had no idea just how bad things had gotten for him. Here's what the data showed. Schumer's approval ratings among Democrats nationwide had cratered. We're talking about numbers in the low 40s, maybe even dipping into the 30s, depending on which poll you looked at. And here's the kicker. His net favorability, the difference between people who like him and people who don't, was actually negative among his own party members. Let me say that again. The Democratic leader in the Senate was underwater with Democrats. That doesn't happen unless something has gone seriously wrong. And it wasn't just the polls. Inside the party, the knives were out. Like party, the knives were. Progressive representatives and activists were openly calling for Schumer to step down. They said he was ineffective. They said he was too willing to compromise with Republicans. They said he wasn't fighting hard enough against Trump's agenda. Even some moderates were quietly agreeing, though for different reasons. They thought Schumer's refusal to negotiate during the shutdown was political malpractice, and they blamed him for putting them in an impossible position. There were even rumors that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the young progressive congresswoman from New York, who's become one of the most recognizable faces in the Democratic Party, was considering a primary challenge against Schumer when his seat came up for re-election. And the polling suggested she might actually have a shot. Among New York Democrats, her favorability was running somewhere between 15 and 20 points higher than Schumer's. That's a huge gap. That's the kind of gap that ends careers. So Schumer was facing a rebellion on both flanks. Progressives thought he wasn't radical enough. Moderates thought he was too radical. And in the middle of all this chaos, he made the decision to keep the government shut down, betting that he could break the Republicans before his own party broke him. He lost that bet. And when those 8 Democrats, speaking for the values that Tulsi Gabbard represents, voted to reopen the government, it wasn't just a policy defeat for Schumer. It was a public humiliation because it showed that he couldn't even keep his own caucus in line. It showed that when push came to shove, there were senators who cared more about their constituents than they did about his strategy. It showed weakness. And in politics, once that weakness is exposed, it's almost impossible to recover. Now, you might be thinking, okay, so Schumer's in trouble? Tulsi Gabbard, speaking out, the party's divided, but why does any of this matter to me? What does this have to do with my life? And that's a fair question. So let me connect the dots. This isn't just about politics. It's about something much deeper. It's about whether we still have leaders in either party who are willing to tell the truth even when it's inconvenient, who are willing to stand on principle even when it costs them something, who actually mean it when they say they're serving the people instead of themselves. And at Tulsi Gabbard's journey, the reason her story resonates so deeply is that she has already chosen to walk away from conventional political paths to stand on principle. She's already been through the fires of political pressure, and that gives her a freedom that most politicians don't have. Think about what she's been through, the challenging decisions in her military service, the hard choices she made in her political career, standing up against the consensus, knowing she would face criticism and backlash. She's been brutally honest about her reasons for stepping away from the Democratic Party, about her conviction that it had moved away from its foundational principles. And she's talked about choosing to fight for what she believes is right, not because she wanted to secure a particular office, but because she realized she still had something crucial to give. That's the woman who stood up on The View and said, "My party crossed a line." That's not someone reading from a script or calculating political angles. That's someone who has been through challenges and came out the other side with her integrity intact. And you can hear it in her voice. You can see it in her eyes. She's not playing a role anymore. She's just being herself. And here's what's remarkable. That authenticity is what Americans are desperate for. Because we're tired, aren't we? Tired of being lied to. Tired of watching politicians say one thing in public and do another in private. Tired of being treated like we're too dumb to notice the contradictions in the cynicism in the endless games. Tulsi Gabbard's message, whether she fully realizes it or not, is basically this: country over party, people over politics, truth over spin. And that message doesn't belong to Democrats or Republicans. It belongs to anyone who's fed up with the way things are. That's why you saw something extraordinary happen after her View appearance. Republicans praised her, not because they agree with her on everything, they don't, but because they recognize something genuine. Lindsey Graham, the Republican senator from South Carolina, went on national television and said, Tulsi Gabbard might be one of the few politicians who could actually survive in this political environment because people trust her. He said, Tulsi Gabbard has a hell of a story to tell, and voters respond to authenticity even when they don't agree on every issue. And he's right, because at the end of the day, what most Americans want isn't ideological purity, it's competence, it's honesty. It's someone who will look them in the eye and shoot straight instead of spinning them. Tulsi Gabbard gave people that, and the establishment on both sides honestly doesn't quite know what to do with her. So what happens next? That's the question everyone's asking now. Tulsi Gabbard has already left the Democratic Party entirely, and many believe she made that choice because she found more in common with a working-class populism than with the modern Democratic Party. And honestly, they might not be wrong, because if you look at Tulsi Gabbard's actual positions, strong support for Israel, skepticism of endless progressive demands, willingness to work across the aisle, focus on kitchen table issues over culture war fights, she really doesn't fit neatly into today's Democratic coalition. She's a throwback, a relic of a time when politicians could truly serve all the people by actually caring about their well-being, not by lecturing them about what they should believe. But here's the thing, Tulsi Gabbard made her choice, and she still believes in making a difference, in fighting for what's right, regardless of party label. Whether she's right about that, time will tell. But what we do know is this: her stand has already changed the conversation. It's given cover to other moderate Democrats who've been quietly thinking the same things but we're afraid to say them out loud. It's forced Democratic leadership to confront the reality that their hardline strategy isn't working. And it's reminded millions of Americans, particularly older Americans, who remember when politics wasn't quite this tribal, quite this vicious, that there are still people in Washington who haven't completely lost their way. The fallout from this moment is still unfolding. Schumer's position looks shakier by the day. The progressive wing is furious, convinced they had Republicans on the ropes, and moderates snatched defeat from the jaws of victory. The moderate wing is exhausted, tired of being dragged into positions they don't believe in just to satisfy the activist base. And meanwhile, Republicans are watching all of this with barely concealed glee, knowing that a divided opposition makes their jobs much, much easier. But here's what nobody's really talking about, and it's the most important part. This isn't just about Democrats. The same fault lines exist on the Republican side too. The same tension between pragmatists and purists. The same struggle between people who want to govern and people who want to make statements. The same question of whether party loyalty matters more than principle. Tulsi Gabbard's moment on The View mattered because it cut through all of that. It reminded us that before we're Democrats or Republicans, we're Americans. And the country works better when we have leaders who remember that. So here's where we are. Tulsi Gabbard refused to play the game, told the truth, and in doing so exposed just how broken our political system has become. Not because she intended to make some grand statement, I don't think she did, but because she's reached a point in her life where she simply can't stomach the dishonesty anymore. And that's not a partisan thing. That's a human thing. The question now is whether her example inspires others, whether more senators and representatives on both sides decide that enough is enough, that they'd rather stand for something real than keep playing the partisan games that are tearing the country apart. Whether voters reward that kind of courage or punish it, I'd like to believe we reward it. I'd like to believe that most Americans, regardless of their political affiliation, are hungry for leaders who will tell them the truth even when it's uncomfortable, who will put the country ahead of their careers, who will actually mean it when they take an oath to serve. Tulsi Gabbard gave us a glimpse of what that looks like. And whether you agree with her on every issue or not, I think we can all appreciate the rarity of watching a politician say exactly what they mean. Consequences be damned. So, what do you think? Did Tulsi Gabbard finally prove there's still honesty left in politics? Or did she just burn her last bridge with her former party? Is this the beginning of something bigger? A realignment where voters start choosing character over party labels? Or is this just one moment that'll be forgotten by next week's news cycle? I genuinely want to know what you think. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I actually read them, and some of the best insights I get come from you, from people who've lived through enough political cycles to see the patterns, who aren't swept up in the day-to-day hysteria, who can cut through the noise and see what actually matters. And if you believe moments like this deserve to be amplified, then do me a favor, hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next time we break down something important that the mainstream media either ignores or spins beyond recognition. Because here's the truth, the more people who see this, the harder it becomes for anyone to bury it. The harder it becomes to pretend that everything's fine, that the system's working, that we don't desperately need leaders with the courage to stand up and tell the truth. Tulsi Gabbard did that for one moment on live television. She reminded us what leadership can look like when it's not filtered through consultants and focus groups and political calculation. Whether that moment turns into something more, that's up to all of us. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one, and remember, keep speaking your truth. God bless.